Today, we are digging deep into the contracts and chargebacks process in the pharmaceutical industry, which is really where MediLedger is going to kickstart some big initiatives this year. Today, we're specifically talking about blockchain and how it's going to be relevant in resolving disputes and sort of automating a lot of the processes that come with it. Some admin points. Participants, everyone here should be muted automatically, just so everything is, there's some some focus and people can see and hear what Suzanne's going to be talking about. If you have any questions, there is a Q&A tool, which I'll be monitoring throughout so that I can pose questions to Suzanne during and after. We'll have a designated Q&A portion at the end. And I think that the last piece, there will be a poll at the end for anyone right before you leave. Make sure you catch that. And I think that's about it. So quick intros. My name is Mike. I'm head of marketing here at Chronicled. And I'm going to be handing it off to Suzanne Somerville, our CEO. And I think, yeah, thank you so much. Well, Suzanne, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you all for joining today. We're really excited to talk about how blockchain can improve business processes, and specifically today we're going to talk about the contracting and chargeback process. So in today's webinar, for those of you not familiar, we're going to briefly talk a little bit about the MediLedger Network and what we envision is possible with the technology today. We're going to talk about contract and chargebacks, the current state, and where we think chargebacks can go. And then we're going to walk through 5 ways that blockchain is going to be able to help resolve disputes and frankly eliminate disputes in the contract and chargeback process. So to start with the MediLedger Network, blockchain is a fantastic new technology that's going to enable capabilities that didn't exist before. What it can enable is the creation of a real-time industry-wide network that's going to be able to automate the business that companies do between each other. So beyond your own 4 walls. When you think about things like, is this product authentic? Was my rebate correct? Are the raw materials coming from the right supplier? All are processes that can't be done by one company by themselves. It requires manual intervention, auditing and checking, and often dispute resolution. And that's where blockchain can create the trust in a decentralized network that can enable that to happen. What's exciting about it is it can actually take the data and transactions you get from other companies and enforce your business rules before the data even arrives. Kind of like putting an embassy behind your trading partner's firewall to make sure that your rules are checked and understood. And we're going to show you some examples of that today. The network has been architected so that no business intelligence is leaked. You can securely be in a network with not just your trading partners, but your competitors with confidence that only the people who should be seeing the data are seeing the data. But it enables the ability to do checks against the blockchain to ensure that data is accurate and, as noted here, that the business rules are enforced. It's a decentralized solution, so this enables direct communication between trading partners. There is no third party capturing data or holding it in the cloud for you. And it's a construct that's going to be really exciting about a lot of the master data in this industry that can be shared directly from the people who own and control it with others in the industry. And we're confident it's going to unlock value between trading partners. We've been working collaboratively with companies throughout the industry because the idea is that blockchain-based solutions are really for, again, business between parties. And so it really takes the industry to help define and design how those processes should work and looking at processes that honestly benefit everyone. We're also really excited about the industry organizations that have joined our effort with the data that they manage or the standards they help control. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the context of contract and chargebacks as well. So contract and chargebacks, I imagine a lot of people on the webinar are very familiar with the process. The current state is tremendous people and resources and processes that have been developed that connect companies as best they can in the process that happens today. But despite all that heroic effort, there still is disputes that result because data is not aligned. There's a lot of manual effort in that data alignment, both bringing in data, reprocessing data, setting it up for that company's view and business rules, and then passing on that data to their trading partner, where then their manual effort often takes place as well. From all this, there's substantial revenue loss. People don't agree on eligibility. The wrong price is offered. It requires ad bills and rebills for customers and makes really for a bad experience. And everyone really wants to make sure the customer is getting the right price and as little disruption as possible for the work that they're doing. So if we think about the parties involved in all the, I would say, heroic efforts to really make sure this works correctly, it still isn't a flawless operation. From this, industry records show there's actually substantial revenue loss across the industry, and I would argue it's not necessarily clear which party is winning or losing. I think it may be a trade-off between others just because of the lack of clarity of the data and the alignment between companies. It's reported that 4% of chargeback claims end up disputed. If we think of 2.5 million chargebacks in the industry today, that's 100,000 disputes that need to be resolved every single day. And there's a lot of manual effort, and you guys might know this, of companies who, like I said, I think with all good intentions and effort, have done a lot of work to streamline the process and make it as easy as possible. But simply from the construct that companies are updating their systems independently, there will be issues of both data entry errors and misalignment in understanding of the data that's going to keep that manual effort going the way the process is done today. So now I want to start by walking through the 5 reasons we found that blockchain enables the ability to actually resolve those disputes and get everyone on the same page. And step 1 is that blockchain enables us to establish a trusted and secure network of trading partners and, ironically, competitors as well. The MediLedger Network is made up of effectively 2 layers. When people think of blockchain, they think of what we've demonstrated here as those red circles in the middle. It is a set of nodes where all data or transactions that are posted to the blockchain are shared with everyone in the network. And we're going to talk about how valuable that is for a lot of the industry data that companies use today. But there's a second layer to the network, the blue line you see around the blue squares. And this is a peer-to-peer interface between companies that enables direct peer-to-peer messaging between parties that do not get posted on the blockchain and no one else in the network has visibility to. It's just between those parties that are involved in that transaction. So we can enable the private sharing of information between parties as necessary, and the necessary information that can be posted to the blockchain that is either shared amongst parties or is actually obfuscated, hidden from view, but provides the logic necessary for the other parties in the network to validate that transactions took place. The power of the blockchain is that no one can change any of the data recorded there. And so it does become an immutable record because everyone is holding a record of it. No one can independently change any of the data. But it's this network together that we have designed that we permission companies onto the blockchain. That permissioning is today a manual effort. There's exciting blockchain projects underway to make that automated as well. But we will manually identify companies and associate them with their appropriate company identifiers. It could be a GS1 prefix, it could be HIN or GLN numbers, but those identifiers then put them in the network and everyone knows who's in the network and how they've been identified. And this sets up the ability to enable this peer-to-peer messaging between parties. So that's the first way blockchain is helping to create the construct that the contract and chargeback solution would be built upon. The second benefit of blockchain is that everyone is operating on the same real-time data from third parties and shared master data. Everyone has the same access and it's being updated real time. So we've identified in discussions with companies that a lot of data that people are accessing has multiple sources, and it enables the fact that people can be slightly misaligned. I'll start with what we talked about just now. On the network, all authorized participants are identified and everyone is connected to the same data sets of those companies. The next category is product master data necessary to run the solution. Manufacturers control all of the master data about their own products, but they can be pushed to the blockchain for others to consume as necessary to ensure that they are aligned and talking about the same products, down to the product names and maybe product identifiers. But the part I think is really exciting is connecting external identifier data. There are a variety of identifiers that are used in the industry, and we're going to get into that a little bit in some of the next sections as well. But even today, there are multiple versions potentially available, and you're also become reliant on when companies are individually updating their systems, perhaps with new data from these databases. By putting companies together in a network and having integrations to these databases directly in real time, we can ensure that everyone is operating off the same data sets. And we even have an opportunity to provide feedback when data seems misaligned. Everyone can be alerted at the same time, or people in the network themselves can send an alert, something seems wrong with this data, or something has changed with this HIN number, to almost, if you could imagine, crowdsource information about changes that are taking place. We're super excited that as the contract and chargeback solution is launching, we will be establishing integrations with HIBIC, HRSA, and DEA. And we're excited at looking ahead at AHD, NPI, and Apexis as other data sets that are very valuable to the industry to make sure that we're all aligned on the same data.
Suzanne, there was a question here I just wanted to clarify. It was about company, when you join the network, do you need to wait for your trading partners to join as well, or is there immediate value?
So I think, and we'll go through the conversation, certainly the value comes when your trading partners are connected, but there actually is individual value for different industry participants, specifically manufacturers, by being connected even prior to your trading partners. And we'll walk through some of the automation that we've enabled and some of the work we're doing for GPO data that's maybe for a GPO that's not participating in the network. We can still do some data validation that can be helpful to them. Great question. So the third benefit we see is the enablement of cross-company business rule enforcement. So let's walk through that. If we look at the contract and chargeback solution to illustrate how this business rule enforcement is going to work, we've now, let's say in this scenario, onboarded a manufacturer, a GPO, and a distributor who are now participating in the network. Well, the first thing that's going to happen, as we just discussed, is that common public data is going to be pushed to all parties so that they're operating off the same data sets, and they know that their trading partners have the exact same data set they do. I think that's a slight nuance, but really significant, that you know what your trading partners have as well. In step two, GPOs will be able to real-time update the manufacturers with updates to their roster. But what's exciting is on that roster communication, and they'll send it to the distributors as well, real-time, but we can now do rule enforcement. So if, for example, a DEA number on a GPO member doesn't exist in the DEA database, we have that linkage to actually stop that updated customer record from going to the manufacturer. It stops at the GPO's door and says, GPO, this DEA number is not valid. You need to fix it before you send it on. We're also in discussion with the companies from our working groups on specific data fields and constructs that are important to them. For example, maybe certain fields cannot be left blank, or perhaps maybe for certain companies, it requires that there's a minimum one identifier. These are the discussions we're having in the working group, and those are the business rules that can be set up so that the GPO, frankly, has a better system to signal data that's not accurate and get it fixed. and a manufacturer and distributor can be assured that the data they're receiving has been cleaned up and validated. Then the manufacturer now is able to, through automation, to evaluate with both the combination of the data sets that we've integrated, along with the validated data about the customers, who is eligible for which contracts. So we are connecting all the data, and we know that manufacturers have bespoke algorithms. We'll go into it in a little bit more detail in a couple of the value propositions coming up. But we've enabled the appropriate rules engine for a manufacturer to put the logic they use for eligibility determination. And now every time there are new customers that they believe are eligible for their contracts, they can send that directly to the distributor, these customers and this eligibility. It's the same with pricing updates as well. When they do that, they're also putting in that hashed line a proof onto the blockchain that represents the latest state of the contract. So it will append the previous state that was stored there before. This state of the contract is obfuscated with cryptography, but it contains the logic that understands all the products, all the prices, and all the eligibility for use in the next step. And now, when the distributor, let's say 2 weeks or 2 months later, goes to sell to that updated customer in that contract, what they're going to do is, as they are selling the drug to a hospital dispenser and invoicing them, they're going to check against the blockchain, and they will actually post a transaction that their chargeback meets the appropriate eligibility and pricing, so that when they send the chargeback to the manufacturer, it is automatically accepted. It matches the latest state of the contract, and it meets all of the business rules. So that's in principle then how the flow works, and how business rule enforcement is taking place in every single step of this entire process.
Susan, we had a question. What's the reasoning behind performing reconciliation at the peer-to-peer network layer instead of at the blockchain layer, more specifically the smart contract layer?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. What we've discovered, I think, viewed it as sort of almost a data repository, that everything could be put on the blockchain, maybe in an encrypted fashion, and other people then could pull off the blockchain. The reason we're doing mostly, actually a lot of peer-to-peer validation is because most of the business that takes place is actually taking place just between 2 or 3 business partners. And hence all the data does not need to be on the blockchain to enable that business communication. And actually it's sort of a wasted use of capacity if all of that data was there and literally only 1 or 2 parties needed to be involved. So we actually are looking at a combination of peer-to-peer messaging where the information really stays between 2 parties, and the appropriate proof that needs to go on the blockchain that can ensure the automation of processes like the chargeback payment. So there are design decisions that take place, but it really comes down to efficiency and best use of the technology.
Suzanne, there was one other question about HRSA and DEA and some of the other third-party entities. Are they actual participants in the network, and do they have access to any of the chargeback data?
It's a great question. So HIBIC is actively participating, and we are hopeful that they'll be setting up a node in the network so that they can manage their data directly. I'll say the current expectation is that companies who participate and have access to HIBIC data will still need their individual licenses with HIBIC, though there might be some exciting prospects in the future. And then we're integrating with DEA and HRSA directly, though they are not as actively involved, though we're looking at discussions with them. The excitement about HIBIC, I think, is they also want to see how they can serve their customers better. And by having direct access, they'll have the capability to have direct feedback as there are perhaps issues with some of the HIN information that is being used in some of the information. But that said, let's go back to the design. If HIBIC runs a node, they will know everything that's on the blockchain. That today would be public data. and it would be alphanumeric strings that represent the proofs that are put on the blockchain. So HIBIC and no one would have access to any pricing or any other relevant information unless they were involved in a transaction. Again, that's why the peer-to-peer messaging would communicate confidential information between parties such that no one else in the network would have exposure to anyone's pricing or confidential information.
Thanks. I think you're good to continue.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's maybe a really key message here. Again, it depends on blockchain design. Unless we were to create a mini blockchain for every set of trading partners for every combination and permutation they do, that would actually be, frankly, it wouldn't work. It would just be too many different little networks. So by putting people with the right data peer-to-peer and the right data that's literally shared by the industry together, again, it's this design principle that makes this work for all parties to join the network safely and have no concerns that their confidential information is disclosed to anyone. So our fourth, and this actually was already started in this last conversation, is number 4 is that validated and connected data will enable really exciting automation that wasn't possible before. So the first I want to talk about is customer mapping. We did a lot of exploration in how the industry identifies customers, and what we found is that there are a lot of different reasons why companies identify customers slightly differently. If we could envision sort of this customer over here maybe as a large hospital, a manufacturer may view the pharmacy as one specific customer, but maybe they view clinics in the hospital as different customers. Or maybe they have a whole set of relationships with a single clinic, maybe for a variety of reasons, maybe clinical trial work they're doing, maybe other type of treatment work. The group purchasing organization as well may identify different components of the hospital uniquely, or maybe have a single identifier for the whole hospital. And the distributor also may have different relationships. Maybe they're helping with some of the pharmacy services for one part of the hospital. Maybe they're really concerned about the ship-to address for other components. And so what we found is, I would say, what a lot of people were hoping for is, can we just have a single identifier, really is not realistic because of the way people do business today. So we've enabled automated customer mapping. And again, this has to do with sort of the compounding effect of the fact that the companies are in a network together and the fact that we have the shared databases that everyone is operating from. And we can use that to create the appropriate customer maps to ensure that with every chargeback transaction and every contract, the different parties involved in that are using the same appropriate information to identify a customer. This is a busy slide, but let me walk you through real quickly. If we imagine, and maybe this is a extreme situation, but valuable to show sort of the compounding problems that take place. If there is a single DEA identifier shown there on the left with the doctor, it could be that that DEA license is used at 3 different locations, Hospital A, Clinic A, and I'm sure that was meant to be Clinic B, so that we have 3 different locations with the same license. But what if the GPO has a single customer that's identified by that DEA identifier? The manufacturer actually might have multiple customer records that map back to that identifier, again, based on different locations and different eligibility requirements for that customer. And as you see here, that customer now can be mapped. And so the solution is designed to start actually from the manufacturer's perspective. What is the scheme they're interested in? In this case, the manufacturer is looking at a DEA plus city plus state plus zip code as an identifier, and that allows that customer to be connected to the appropriate contracts that benefit, that they're eligible for and that matter for the business that they're doing. That contract now can even then go down to the distributor level, where they as well may have multiple customer identifiers listed there based on that contract and based on maybe specific businesses done there. So this customer mapping is going to allow the GPO manufacturer and distributor to ensure that they're talking about the same customer and that the same customer is aligned in that contract and chargeback, So again, that it can allow the automation downstream. The other part of automation that we've done that is super exciting is, again, with all this connected data, we can now look at the manufacturers and their eligibility algorithms that are proprietary to them themselves to connect this data and be able to run against, frankly, the entire GPO's roster to identify who is eligible or who may potentially be eligible. We found in a lot of our discussions that manufacturers, in a lot of cases, only evaluate customers that that a sale has been made to, and this puts the onus on the distributor to make a guess. Right, the distributor is going to have to guess at who they think might be eligible for a specific contract, make that sale, and then after the fact, the manufacturer will do that evaluation to decide if that customer should be in the contract or not. It's very much understandable with GPO rosters in the tens of thousands. A manufacturer is not going to assess every single customer for eligibility ahead of time. But this allows, frankly, the computer to do the work for the company. It doesn't necessarily require that the manufacturer put all the customers in their system, but can put out a educated guess based on that manufacturer's rules, which customers in that GPO roster would be eligible for different contracts. And again, this is customizable, again, with data sets, including the identifiers, including all the other logic that manufacturers are using today. We're looking to get connected so that the entire GPO rosters can be assessed. And I would say eventually, the wholesaler literally will just need to get the contract, the customers who are eligible for what contract and what price, and then can just execute on it.
We had a couple questions, Suzanne. One is, in general, does MediLedger have a UI for entering contract and pricing data, or is it loaded via an interface, from legacy systems?
That's a great question. So we've been, again, in our explorations in our working group, which has been really a powerful tool to really understand how the industry does business. We've understood that there are certain solutions that are used by the industry. And so we've created adapters, I'll say, to Model N, so that companies can actually leverage their existing solutions. Model N can still be the source of truth, and MediLedger can play a role as a pass-through. But we also have the ability for companies to manually enter contract information as well. And we're certainly open to explore the appropriate integrations or connectors to be built for other solutions in the industry. And we would look at that probably on a case-by-case basis. If we find enough volume, we can build a common integrator for the industry. If not, it may rely on integrations at a company level with their core systems.
Excellent. And there was a couple more. You may want to go back to the last slide for this, but a DEA number, the question is, shouldn't it normally be based on their address? So why would there be the same DEA number for 3 different locations based on their address, or three different locations? Yeah.
Right. It's a great question. And again, maybe it was a extreme example that we wanted to put here. Absolutely. If the rule for a company is that a DEA can only exist at one address, then that would be something that would push through the system. So we would look at both industry use of the data to correct and clean things up, as well as the way individual companies have operated. And I'll just say we've found a lot of edge cases. Whether they should work that way or not, I think is an open question. We can't, we're doing our best to understand how the industry operates today and really design systems and processes that manage that way. So yes, again, maybe this is an extreme example. Maybe this shouldn't happen, but if you can imagine other variants of this, of other identifiers and maybe unique situations, how they're set up, we can create the mapping to ensure that everyone's talking about the same customer.
Great. And it's also, one last question. It's often the case that there could be more than one valid contract in place between a manufacturer and a customer for like combinations of products and dates and things like that. And the rules can get pretty complex for like what contract takes precedent. So in terms of prioritization between contracts, does the solution support that?
So I think we've had that come up in some conversations, and I think it would depend on the specific situation, but certainly we could automate the way that prioritization takes place. I only have a little hesitance because I would want to understand the guidance from the distributor's role of picking pricing versus the manufacturer, and where contractually that authority that sits. So again, we're looking at between trading partners how to make the process work. So we're looking to take into play everyone's, whether it's contractual requirements, agreements between companies of how business is done, and that's what we can organize. But I would say that certainly is possible, and the technology can support that.
Perfect. And there was one thing I wanted to add, and it was also confirmed by one of our attendees that in some situations, and sometimes a DEA number is attached to a physician, and the doctor practices at different locations. So this does happen, and some feedback we've gotten from some of the companies we work with.
Yeah. And it's a great comment, and I appreciate the other comment that it shouldn't happen. I would say this is, I think, an interesting world of, again, what we've learned in working with companies of what actually does happen in practice. And I think as much as, like I said, we could all fantasize that we would all align on a single process, I think everyone sitting in their own company realizes there's reasons the way they do business the way they do. And so we're really looking to design the solution, frankly, that meets you where that is and enables you to, again, do the business the way you do with their trading partners. But taking advantage of, again, the unified data that everyone can operate on.
Sounds good. One more question for this section, and then we'll save some of the others coming in here for the end. But on the next slide, on the business rules for the manufacturer, does the manufacturer determine their own class of trade based on their own rules? So can they make their own decisions, with rules that they set up?
Exactly. So it is very clear that every manufacturer has their own unique rules. And maybe I'll add on to that those rules of how you determine eligibility are confidential and proprietary to you. So the rules engine that exists sits inside the manufacturer's private node, and no one else has access to this logic unless you made a choice to share it with them. So literally, it will bring in the information both from the databases and the new members. You can run your engine for eligibility, and what comes out is who is eligible for what contract. And that gets communicated back to both the GPO, which is a benefit for them to be able to see actually upfront a manufacturer's evaluation, as well as to the distributor for the distributor to act upon. It actually highlights a really good point. What if that class of trade or eligibility differs from what a GPO thinks their customer should get, or what the GPO's customer thinks they should get? What we think is exciting about this blockchain solution is rather than waiting for a sale to have that conversation in the form of a dispute, this actually highlights to the GPO upfront what the manufacturer is thinking. It does not reveal the evaluation procedure. It just says what the manufacturer, who the manufacturer thinks is eligible and not, and can trigger a proactive conversation between parties to identify why there's misalignment. By having all that happen up front, it frankly guarantees that everyone's on the same page when the chargeback happens. Okay, number 5, the exciting finale here. Blockchain now enables the automation of the chargeback itself. So let me walk through again this process. As we've been talking about, the manufacturer has new information. Maybe it's a new contract, maybe it's a new eligible customer has been added to the contract, maybe the price has been updated. As I talked about before, we're looking at business rule enforcement to make sure all these meet the rules that are expected of how the contract is set up and the rules that are met. When that manufacturer agrees to these updates, they'll post a proof on the blockchain that's hidden from everybody, but now creates a record that that wholesaler is going to use later to check against to make sure that they're operating with the right eligibility and the right pricing. As they make those updates to the contract, they're also going to directly communicate the information to the distributor peer-to-peer so that it lands in the distributor's private node and they can consume it into their core systems that have been integrated into the solution. And the distributor now, like we talked about, when they go to sell that drug, they're going to check against the blockchain and use that rule enforcement. Am I selling at the right price and the right eligibility? And if so, their invoice now proceeds. Their invoice proceeds regardless, but the chargeback that now takes place will happen automatically to the manufacturer, and they can be assured that that chargeback will be honored because it met the rules that the manufacturer put in place and the latest state of the contract that the manufacturer put in place. So that's it. 5 ways that a blockchain can help resolve disputes. Number 1, it establishes a trusted and secure network of trading partners. Number 2, it ensures that everyone is operating on the same data and that data now can become real time. I know in today's world, that's not necessarily the case. Number 3, it enables cross-company business rule enforcement on a variety of levels, both at the peer-to-peer messaging level, as well as being able to check against the blockchain. It enables an exciting level of automation. We talked today about the customer mapping, as well as the eligibility determination that becomes possible. And finally, it automates the chargeback and ensures that the chargeback goes through accurately every single time. We're really excited about the way this blockchain can enable real-time alignment between companies on things as basic as the customer identity and the contract terms, rather than having everyone update their systems independently and really, again, with all that heroic effort, do their best to make sure that things are aligned. We can ensure that business rules are enforced, both to check the chargeback accuracy at the end of the process, but even on the way, to really make sure that the data you're getting is clean and meets your rules, so that you can really not use the time to fix other people's problems. You can use it to really analyze and strategize on the work that you're doing. The chargebacks will happen automatically in the first pass, and we're just excited at the outcome and benefits from all this. We really believe strongly this will reduce ad billing and rebilling. It'll definitely provide a superior customer experience. Chargeback errors will be drastically eliminated. It creates the potential for accelerated cash flow. Everything is happening in real time. This can lead to reductions in overhead and, frankly, repurposing staff to work on better, higher value strategic projects. And all the revenue leakage, wherever it's happening, will be reduced. It's an exciting vision of what's to come. If you're interested in learning more, I'll just tell you that we do have our ongoing working group that is continuing to work on the design as the solution is now available. We will be doing intercompany testing. And so that's a possibility for people to participate. We're also launching a Launchpad network for companies who are not yet participating, who want to test out and see how it feels. We'll have the test network, as I said, that is being started with companies and their integrations to see how they will be actually interacting with each other. And then the production network will be deployed in the July timeframe so that we can actually start seeing return on investment for all companies involved. I'll stop there. Thank everyone for the time today and would love to take additional questions.
Thanks, Suzanne. That was amazing. That was great. A couple of questions. The first one is, does the need for a DEA number in that example you mentioned restrict the MediLedger to US-based firms?
So today, the contracting and chargeback solution that we're working on is primarily focused on how the revenue management takes place here in the United States. So the DEA number is associated with hospitals and doctors here in the United States. If there are use cases where this solution could be valuable in other parts of the world, I'm happy to listen to hear about it. I will say global manufacturers who sell in the US, this is the process that they work with.
Great. There was a question about EDI 845s, the price updates that apparently there have been attempts by some manufacturers to send those to GPOs. And it was, I guess the question is just, are we basically planning to address that? Is that sort of a similar comparison to how we plan to have the process run in MediLedger?
Right, that's a fantastic question, and I apologize for not hitting upon it. We are designing the solution that our peer-to-peer messaging can replace EDI. And I think there was actually a plan, and I want to say it was EDI 812, but don't quote me, I might be wrong, that people have been working on to send GPO roster information to manufacturers. I wasn't sure about the 845 going to a GPO, but this actually between trading partners can replace EDI, all of the EDIs that are taking place between them. And for today enables the GPO to get that information real time directly as well. We understand that some companies are relying on EDI, and so we've also worked on EDI adapters so that they can connect to the system while getting the data via EDI. The reason we think it might be time to retire EDI is it's literally a data exchange and can't necessarily provide the same rule enforcement that we can through the MediLedger Network. So again, we want to meet companies where they're at. And could have specific conversations, but we're enabling the solution to replace the EDI between companies, and even in the case of the GPO, provide communication and information that they don't have today about the manufacturer's opinions of their customers and eligibility in their contracts.
Perfect. And then there is a question around tokens, which is obviously classically associated with public blockchains. Are the chargebacks on this blockchain used by MediLedger interchangeable between smart contracts and tokens?
So we've stayed away from, I would say, traditional crypto tokens as people think of them, because we didn't think this industry would necessarily have the appetite for that. But the actual underlying technology and how we've structured it is based on a token exchange model. So for those who are interested, we can talk about that further. But yes, that items are effectively tokenized in the system, and it's part of the logic that we use to ensure the sharing of either information or entities between the parties. Perfect.
And then how soon will the whole system be completed, and how does pricing work? How does Chronicle charge participants?
Yeah, so the solution will be done, I think, sometime later this week. As I mentioned, companies that are working with us are already setting up integrations and will stand up the test network. And the expectation is the production network will go live this summer. So it's available now for companies to engage in the conversation if they're interested. The pricing model is that similar to SaaS software, there'll be annual fees, and we can provide more information. But the idea is that we can provide companies the software, help them set up their infrastructure, and they can run a node in the network. For companies that maybe don't have that IT bandwidth, we're also looking at opportunities that solution providers can host the infrastructure for a company if that proves a better fit. But people should certainly reach out to us. We're more than happy to talk further about what might be possible for them.
Excellent. And let's see. Is the DEA linked to the PIN number for doctors in the US?
So the DEA and the HIN number are not linked because, again, there's a whole set of variation on how those identifiers are used. I will say, if you look here at the screen, tips for managing and improving our eligibility determination is going to be our next webinar at the end of May. I think we can go into a little bit more detail there, what we've learned about the identifiers in the industry and how each company uses them in their own unique way. Whether it's on the customer side, there's a lot of variation, and then how manufacturers use them for eligibility, there's a whole variety there. But again, we're trying to meet the industry where they're at to enable what works for each of you and how you do business today.
Perfect. And we have some folks on the call who are obviously thinking a lot about the DSCSA requirements for 2023. And some that are working on full solutions already. How can they partner with MediLedger to test and think about solutions there?
Yeah, so please reach out to us. We do have other solutions for product verification on the DSCSA side. And maybe the exciting part about this contract and chargeback work is with this implemented, and again, this is being done at an invoice level. We do know the future is the movement of drugs through the supply chain at a serialized unit level. We're excited that actually we can then connect our contract and chargeback work to the serialized data work and make them work together. And actually with a serialized chargeback, literally all revenue leakage becomes eliminated, and manufacturers can understand the movement of their medicine at a unit level and the financial transactions that are taking place with that. So there's a lot of exciting potential. Maybe one other I'll throw out. We've heard a lot of feedback from the industry that there's also the same similar process for medical surgical materials, not just prescription medicine. So we're looking, if companies are interested, to create a new working group later this year where we can start tackling the medical surgical chargeback, contract and chargeback process as well.
Is there a demo available? The question was specifically, have we built a blockchain already, and is there a demo available?
There is a demo available on the blockchain that we are more than happy to demonstrate for companies. Please reach out to us and we'd be happy to show you exactly how it works. And again, as we said, our Launchpad network will even enable companies to sort of sign on to their own nodes so they can test out a few of the functionality themselves. But we can show you a demo as a first step and then move from there.
Sounds great. And then a lot of GPO contract pricing is driven by specific purchasing commitments in addition to membership-based eligibility. Does the current solution support this?
Right. So I think there are elements on our roadmap that can get to the purchasing volume. I don't want to speak out of turn because I know there's a lot of functionality that has been built already. So I would recommend, if people are interested, please reach out and we can answer more questions about the logic we're going to use to be able to address the volume-based pricing and the logic that's necessary to make sure that's done correctly.
Great. And then can you speak again to how companies can participate in the solution design? I think specifically around the working groups, maybe how they're formed, and what sort of action is required to, or requirements to join, and how people can join.
Yeah. So from the very beginning of MediLedger back in 2017, again, knowing that blockchain-based solutions were really to solve the way business is done between parties, we knew that it would take collaborative effort to bring companies together to discuss and describe that space in between, right? How is business done, and how can we design a solution and the appropriate plumbing to meet everyone's requirements and make sure it's a win for everyone. So what we've done is, as we've heard of problems in the industry, we've reached out to understand what companies were interested in participating in working groups, and they've coalesced around that shared business problem. So this working group, as I mentioned, is ongoing. So if companies are interested in joining our working group calls, again, please reach out and we can identify a way to see if we can bring you in on a call to see how the process works. And we can discuss further what would be requirements to join the working group formally. Today, we do limit the working group participation to manufacturers, wholesalers, and GPOs that are participating in the process. But if you don't play one of those roles and are interested in participating, certainly talk to us and we can identify a way that might be possible, or find out the right way that you can participate in the work that's going on.
Great. Another question was about the standards. EDI obviously has been around for a while, and so there's sort of messaging standards that are embedded in that, called X12, I believe is the reference in the question. So what has been proposed for our peer-to-peer messaging standards, and what's been contemplated for how they'll be structured?
Yeah, so I think the intention is absolutely to leverage the EDI standards that exist. They've obviously been successful in the business that's done today. However, we have found that there are still room that people are interpreting EDI messages differently or treating them differently. And we believe that the complement of both the, I would say, EDI data standard along with the business rule enforcement can ensure that the messages are interpreted correctly every single time. A great story from our working group is initially when we spoke with people, everyone said EDI works fine. And that's the message we got repeatedly. And then finally, we heard some stories that the EDI works fine, but we send an email along with it to explain why we set up the EDI the way we did. That's what we'd like to get away from, a world of communication plus email plus phone calls. We should be able to define the rules. And I would say on our future roadmap is, could we even also put chat into the system so that everyone's looking at the same information about the customer, the history of changes to that customer or the contract, and you could even chat to resolve things literally in the same screen as the exact customer information. So there's a lot of exciting things sitting in just in the near future, but that again become enabled by companies sitting in a network together.
And I just want to make sure that I think that's super helpful. The question, I want to make sure I addressed it. There may be one part that I miscommunicated, but I think that it was specifically around sort of the X12 standards that EDI has. Obviously, is there a different set of standards for what the messages actually look like for our peer-to-peer messaging if we're proposing to replace EDI?
So I would say this probably merits a conversation with some of our more technical people. Again, we are enabling EDI adapters. So for companies that are not ready to move off of EDI and the integration would make it easier, we can still use EDI to communicate from MediLedger to maybe their core systems or to their trading partners. But for that specific question, I would say let's follow up with some of the folks in our technical group to answer it accurately.
Perfect. And then another question is, all manufacturing units and distributors both have to be on the MediLedger platform, is MediLedger collecting information on distributor sales separately?
On distributor sales. So the benefit really comes when the distributor and the manufacturer are on the same platform. But as I mentioned before, I think even manufacturers on the platform and the ability to automate a lot of their processing may have potential. But we're working with the major wholesalers today that most of the manufacturers work with. So we'd have to explore that question maybe with some specifics a little bit more. But there's value out of the automation. As we mentioned, we're excited for GPOs that want to participate, and for GPOs that are not participating, we can still do a data validation, again, against the integrated databases that sit in the network.
Perfect. I think that was the last question. So I want to thank everyone for joining. Before you leave, I'm going to launch a quick poll here, as we'd love to just get some feedback on, I mean, there's a lot of complicated topics we talked about today and others that sort of revolve around potential use cases for blockchain. And we'd love to understand what you're interested in digging in more on. So this should be a multi-choice question. And if it's not, we'd love to please send a chat if there's other feedback you'd like to give. But yeah, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Oh, there is one other question, actually about the FDA DSCSA report on the pilot that we completed. We launched in February. What was the most important thing that we learned from that? And what have we learned from others' reports on the same pilot?
Yeah, I would say the most important thing, and maybe it becomes personal, I think certainly the discussion that is continuing at the industry level of what people's expectations of interoperability are. I think there's still a wide range of interpretations of the law is really significant. But I would say the power of the potential of what's possible if the industry is in a network. Things like counterfeit, things like diversion can actually be drastically reduced if not solved. So I would say that's sort of my positive takeaway from the work. But I would say from the other industry reports of people having other perspectives, I think the most important thing is the ongoing conversation at the industry level of how we can come together and figure out how to solve this for the industry for the benefit of everyone, is certainly my takeaway. But I think there's still a lot of work to do. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway. And that even with 2023 a little ways away, the urgency is now for the industry. And I'm really proud, I would say, of the industry leaders who have led interpretation of the law to date. And I'm very confident in the work that's ongoing right now to define what the industry wants as sort of their requirements for that industry interoperability will really allow companies to innovate and develop with all the exciting technology today. You guys, the potential is amazing of what's possible. No one should set their sights short. This is the opportunities now to set it up correctly.
Thanks, Suzanne. I think that wraps it up. Suzanne, do you want to close us out, Suzanne?
I just want to thank everyone for taking the time today to join the conversation. Please let us know other topics that you might be interested in, and anyone who wants to learn more specifically maybe for their company of how to participate, we're more than happy to take those emails and calls and figure out how we can continue to grow what really is a win for everybody. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.